Thank you.
Item number 11, requests for water or wastewater connections outside of the city limits, presented by Diana Langley, our interim city manager.
It's me again. All right, so for background on this item, periodically the city receives requests from property owners located outside of the city to connect to city water and sewer. There's typically 3 different scenarios that occur. You have a developer that wants to develop a vacant piece of property that's located outside of the city but in close proximity to city water and sewer. You have a property that has a failing on-site septic system where they want to connect to city sewer. Or sometimes you just have people who aren't happy with the quality of their well water and they want to connect to city water, or their property is configured such that they don't have expansion area for the on-site septic system and they want to put a pool in, or they want to add an expansion to their house, and so that triggers the connection to city wastewater. So past practice has been that we execute extraterritorial service agreements, also known as utility service connection agreements or tri-party agreements. The first ones that I could find date back to the 1980s. If I recall correctly, we have approximately 60 of these agreements in place. Some have been recorded, some have not. But basically what these agreements state is that in exchange for connecting to city water or wastewater, at such time as the opportunity arises for you to annex, you'll agree to annex. After 2011, so for a brief period of time in 2010, 2011, the city council adopted an ordinance change for a very brief amount of time that allowed people to connect to city water specifically without executing these agreements. And then after 2011, as part of the water extension line project to Franklin School along Franklin, we converted some of the large subdivisions on the north side of Franklin to city water. And as part of that, we required annexation. So you have this past practice that's kind of all over the place in terms of what we've done. So as part of the Water Wastewater Workshop, Council provided direction to staff. Please come back with a policy so that we can formalize this, so we can provide residents with information in terms of how to move forward. So staff evaluated this and came up with 4 options. There's more options than this, but these are the ones that seem the most reasonable. So allow connection with no requirements. This is absolutely not supported by staff. We would not recommend this. Number 2, allow connection with execution of an extraterritorial service agreement. Number 3, require annexation prior to connection. And then option 4 would be a hybrid model that would allow properties with failing systems to connect with the execution of an extraterritorial service agreement, require new development to annex prior to connection, and require larger existing development such as existing subdivisions looking to connect to city services to annex prior to connection. So I want to talk about some specific scenarios just to get a sense of, what this means. So here on Lincoln Road, here's Highway 99, Lincoln Road. There's a 4-plex right here that has a failing on-site septic system. So they have reached out to the city and said, hey, what's the possibility of us being able to connect to the city sewer line in Lincoln Road? So under this hybrid model, we would say, okay, you need to execute this extra territorial service agreement, and we would allow you to connect to city sewer. We'd be collecting the connection fees, so they would be subject to all of the fees associated with it, but they would be able to connect without annexing to the city. If you look right here at Karen and Lincoln, you have this vacant property that the owner would like to develop. The owner would like to just be able to connect to city water and sewer without annexing. You can see that the city limits is right here, so in order to annex, they need to be adjacent to the city limits. There would be a question of whether or not they could carve this out to annex, or if they would have to annex this whole piece right here. But, you have situations where you have vacant properties right adjacent to the city limits, and then you have situations where you might have a vacant property that's 100 feet from the city limits. So there's a lot of different scenarios that could occur here that council just needs to have an awareness of. As we create a policy, there might be situations that don't fit exactly within the policy that would require some type of council decision. And so we would do our best to prepare a policy that meets most scenarios, but just recognizing that there could be some situations that the policy doesn't apply. So with that, The recommendation is to establish a policy for water and/or wastewater connections outside of the city limits and direct staff to prepare the necessary documents to formalize and execute the policy. What this would require is, or what we would recommend, that we actually change the ordinances for water and wastewater to be able to, have this in writing in terms of what the policy is going to be for these outside connections. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, I have a speaker card. Okay, would anybody public like to speak? I have a speaker card, Mr. Bob Renton. And Mr. Renton, can you please give your primary residence, please, so we can clarify your primary residence for the record?
Oh, yes, I'd be happy to. I have a funny voice tonight, so bear with me, please. My name is Bob Renton, 1106 Hun Road, Yuba City.
Okay. Excuse me, Mr. Renton, your primary residence, please, sir, or did you move back home?
Oh, I'm sorry. Primary residence is 10192A Luther Road, Live Oak. I have a secondary residence at 1106 Hun Road.
Thank you, sir.
Didn't mean to deceive anyone. First of all, I hate to be in a disagreement with Diana. I think she's doing a fine job. Good evening, everyone. I studied the four options carefully in the packet that was distributed online, and I have some experience with annexation. I'm sure Mr. Gale can vouch for that. Now, to me, option 2 is the clear winner for everyone concerned, the city, the residents, whoever, whether they're in or out of the county, out of the city. My understanding is the city water enterprise funds, freshwater, wastewater, can still benefit from additional service connections for their best economic operation. And I invite Public Works to correct me on that point. Correct. That's correct? Okay, good. Moving forward, option 2 would provide the most opportunity for that economic benefit. For anyone here who would like the cost of their water services to be as low as possible, I know there's one gentleman, you might agree with me. Now, option 2 would allow an excellent project outside city limits to proceed easily. It might not have boundaries that adjacent to the current city limits, but it still could proceed. This is how most of the Walton area was developed. It was later annexed into the city. Option 4 would require the development to have boundaries adjacent to the existing city limits, and LAFCO rules on annexation would make such a development more difficult. And a city island out in the county area is not allowed. So all the land parcels between the proposed development and the existing city boundaries would have to be annexed, as Diane mentioned. That might discourage a developer with a great project. And the cost of annexation alone is not minor. So the bottom line here is option 2 is so much simpler, and I ask you to adopt option 2. And thank you all for listening. And by the way, I would support Diana Langley for city manager. Nobody knows the city better than she does, and the executive team. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Renton. Hey, perfect timing. Was there anybody here else would like to speak on this issue? Please come to the podium, state your name. You can get right behind them and get in line if you'd like.
Can we get the options back up on the thing?
Pardon?
The options?
Oh, can we get the options back up? Oh, they're up. I'm sorry. I didn't look.
Good evening, council members. Tom Tucker, Harder Packing Company, 1321 Harder Parkway. My concern about this is and I'm not for or against it either way, but I just do have one concern. When a party is going to connect to that, who gets the building impact fees? Who gets the put the infrastructure in that? If that's so close to the city, they're going to be using city infrastructure, not just the water. So if they pull a building permit in the county, doesn't the city lose an opportunity to get fees for improvements to its city? So I'd like someone to answer that question. Like I said, I'm not
Diana, can you answer that?
for
please?
or against. I just want to know, there's availability for the city to reap funds, additional funds for impact fees, other services other than just water and sewer.
So my understanding is if the development occurs within the sphere of impact, the sphere of influence, the county would collect the city's impact fees.
Okay.
Ben did note, however, it would be subject to county development standards.
Hi, my name's Heather Esselman. I live on 2020 Lincoln Road. So I purchased a house that was it was previously in the county. And I was one of those situations, though, that it had already been annexed because there was water that was running out there and they hooked up everybody to water. However, the older people that lived in the house that we purchased decided they weren't going to be interested in city water. So fortunately for them, but for us, it wasn't, because when we purchased the house, while we were doing the inspections and everything during the escrow period, we noticed that the septic tank was no longer functioning. So we had to hook up to city water, which was a city sewer, which was very difficult. But we were fortunate because they had been annexed previously. We were able to do that. Basically, my comment right now is that house was originally installed around 63, I think is what they said, and that's what the septic tank was. The houses around it, the same situation. So there's a lot of houses that were built around that time frame where they're going to have the same situation that's occurring right now. Is they're going to have a failing system, particularly if it's going to be discovered with a house purchase or something like that. And so I think it's a good idea to have a situation where they're able to just hook up as quickly as possible, because for us, if that would have fell out of escrow, the timing wouldn't have worked if we weren't able to hook up as quickly as possible. If there wasn't a situation where we could have said, okay, well, if it was county and it was failing, but there was a line that went out there, because on Lincoln up next to Sanborn there are lines. Well, there's a line now up for sewer up to our house anyways, because we had to pay for it to get installed as part of the purchase price. But just to say then that to make sure that it's a possibility if somebody has a failing system that they're able to get that done as quickly as possible, and that there's no delays in that. That's kind of what I was trying to say. So whatever you decide, it needs to kind of coincide with that. That's okay.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to speak? Comments from the council? Questions?
Through the mayor and Diana, having a fair amount of experience back in the day with annexations and water issues, I remember a scenario where where there was a cost sharing for the extension of the main line. Is that still how would that be affected by all of this?
So what we do, if the line's already in place, what we do is look at how is the line funded. If there's a reimbursement agreement in place, we then collect when we collect the fees, we then reimburse whoever constructed it. So we either charge extension fees. So if the city builds the line in advance, we charge extension fees, which is going to be the cost of the frontage of that person's property to reimburse us for building the line. If somebody else advanced the line, then the city executes a reimbursement agreement. So as a benefiting property connects, we're able to collect those fees and then pass it on to the person that developed it.
Is there a time frame where the person or the initial party that pays for that extension would realize their payback, or could that just go on and on and on?
The current reimbursement agreements have a term of 20 years.
And at the end of 20 years, what happens?
They do not get, whatever we've collected is what they get. If we haven't collected anything or we haven't collected the full amount, that's all we get. And then for city staff, if there's a reimbursement agreement that's expired, when we're looking at quoting people to connect to city water or wastewater, if there's an expired agreement, we don't collect the extension fees because the city's not to benefit from that. And that person just got a really good deal in terms of not having to reimburse somebody for building the line.
The other question I have is in regards to the, for instance, on the fourplex. So if one of those fourplexes wanted to go, and let's say it's the one furthest away from the city services, would that be considered? Is it based upon a property line? Is that what you're proposing?
Yeah,
Okay. So there's no leapfrogging.
no.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions from council?
Through the Vice Mayor. This topic just opens up Pandora's box, as it's been kind of kicked down the line for about the last 30 years, because it gets into services, annexation, leapfrogging, all kinds of things. I feel for the people that's having, sewer issues, water issues, and we need to find that avenue. I'm just one of 5 voices, and obviously tonight we are missing our leader, our 5th voice. And I would like to put this on maybe even the next agenda, or see how the mayor would like to handle it, maybe a special workshop with input from the public to get clear direction, because it's not just about connection. It also has to do with annexation. And I, out of respect for our mayor, I would like to have him to have a voice in this, because this is something that's going to affect our city for the next 20 to 30 years. It's not just next week or the next 12 months. So that would be my suggestion, as we schedule up something to go into more detail on this, so that we have all 5 voices and not just 4.
Shannon, should this have been pulled before this came up?
And it's not required to be pulled, but the council certainly can do a motion to continue to the next meeting if they desire.
Okay. Now, Diana, if you could explain to Councilman Shaw, we do have agreements. If someone's sewer or someone's septic tank goes out, and if they're within 200 feet, they get to hook up automatically. They don't have to be annexed in. You're aware of that?
No, well, what we've done is we've executed these utility service connection agreements in the
Right.
past. And so if somebody came to us today and said, my septic's failing, I need to connect to city sewer, what we would do is bring forward this utility service connection agreement to council for council consideration.
Okay.
So it wouldn't, continuing it wouldn't impact if somebody came into the office tomorrow. What we would do is work with the city attorney to come up with a form of the extraterritorial agreement that he agrees to in terms of legal form, and then bring that to council for consideration.
Now, what about this 45, 50 unit apartment complex sitting there on the corner with a failed septic system?
The fourplex.
It's the fourplex.
It's
I'm
a
sorry.
fourplex, yeah.
I'm sorry. I thought it was apartment complex.
Yeah, it's the northeast corner.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I was off one. Okay, so they're going to be able to hold off for another 3-4 months?
This has been ongoing for a few months, so what they're doing is they're, bringing people in to maintain it, pump it. We did talk to them about we would be talking to council for policy direction. We didn't give them a time frame necessarily. If it's something, if council wanted to provide direction that we work with them to work on a utility service agreement, we could, tell them that that's the option for them to address this immediate need, while council considers the policy from a bigger picture perspective.
Okay. And again, your recommendation was option 2, correct? Or
My recommendation is the hybrid model.
the hybrid model is option 4.
And
I'm
one
sorry.
of the reasons I understand Mr. Renton's concerns, and it is expensive to annex, but as Ben noted, one of the concerns from a city staff perspective is having projects, especially new development projects, comply with city standards. That doesn't necessarily mean that through the agreement you couldn't require that they have to comply with city standards without, requiring annexation. So as I mentioned at the beginning, these were just 4 options. There are multiple options. Council could say, you know what, just bring us a case-by-case basis because it doesn't happen that often. And we don't proceed with a formal policy. That could be direction as well.
I would agree with. My light doesn't work. I would agree with Councilman Shaw in deferring until Mayor Harris is back in, but I would like to go on record at this point anyway in supporting the hybrid model. I know this is an issue that's gone on for years and years, and I'm a firm believer in the not extending city services to parcels that aren't going to annex to the city or at least sign the extraterritorial agreement. The other question I have is I don't want to get stuck in a spot where somebody claims an emergency without having that emergency be bona fide. And I've seen where that's happened in the past as well. So whatever we work in, if we work in something on you called it a utility services agreement, I believe,
Yeah.
is that we have some sort of verification that it is in fact a bona fide, valid emergency.
Right. What we've done in the past is work with Sutter County Environmental Health to get documentation that
Perfect.
the system's actually failed.
I support with continuing it to the March 19th, and there could be additional other options of policy in just in the short time of the conversation that we had this evening. But I'm most closer supportive to the hybrid model than the other models at this point. That's where I stand.
Through the Vice Mayor. Mr. Vice Mayor, I move that, which one are we on? Agenda item 11, request for water and wastewater connections outside the city limits be tabled until the March 19th, 2019 meeting.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Go direct staff. Thank you, Diana.
Well,
We don't have to have a motion to vote on this, do we? We do? Oh, I'm sorry. Do we have a second?
hold on.
Oh, we don't have a...
Friendly amendment? I'm learning the language here.
Yeah.
There was an interest in working with this particular property owner, and I wanted to, I think that that's a worthwhile endeavor at this point.
Okay. We'll
So
do that.
moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.